If you can automate your Excel task, you will save yourself countless hours and avoid a lot of headaches. It's like having a real superpower. Once you learn how, you will feel like an office superhero. I've been automating Excel workflows in real business settings for years, and in this video I've put together a short and simple crash course to get you started with automating Excel using Python. First, we will cover the basics of reading and writing values in your spreadsheet. Next, we will explore working with Pandas data frames and running the automation process in the background. Then we will dive into a practical example where we will build a stock report in Excel and even save it as a PDF file. Finally, I will show you how to trigger your Python automation directly from Excel. That way your co-workers can click on a button to run the automation themselves. So without wasting more of your time, let's dive in.
First things first, we need to install the required package. To automate Excel using Python, we will be using xlwings. You can install it by running pip install xlwings. Since we will be also working with data, I'm gonna install Pandas. If you haven't installed Pandas yet, you can do that by running pip install Pandas in your command prompt or terminal. Once that is done, I will import xlwings as xw and also Pandas as pd. And to check if xlwings is installed correctly, I will print out the version. Now let me show you how to connect Python, so xlwings, to your workbook. There are three main scenarios. The first one is if you want to start with a fresh new workbook. In that case, you can create a new workbook like this. The second scenario is if you already have a workbook opened, but it hasn't been saved yet. For that, you can specify the workbook name here. And the last option is if you have a saved workbook and you want to work with that one. In this case, you would need to specify the path to the spreadsheet in the book object. If the workbook is closed, xlwings will open it for you. And if it's already open on your machine, it will just connect to it. So for this example, we will start with a new workbook so that we are all on the same page. When I execute this cell, a new spreadsheet will open. Let me place it next to my script so that you can see both side by side. Once we've connected the workbook, the next step is to specify the sheet you are working with. You could use the active sheet, refer to it by its index, or just use the sheet's name. Once you've got access to the sheet, you can do all sort of things, like creating a new one, deleting one, or in our case, just printing out the sheet name. Alright, now that we have access to the sheet, let's start reading and writing values in Excel. So here's a simple example on how to write a value to a specific cell. And if you're familiar with VBA, this should feel pretty similar. The main difference is that in Python, everything is written in lowercase. Now, reading a value in a cell works the same way. And when I print out the value here, you will see it says hello xlwings. Now let's see how to write multiple values. Here I've got a list of lists. To insert this data into Excel, all you need to do is to specify the top left corner where you want it to go. In this case, that's cell A2. And reading multiple values is just as straightforward. You just specify the range of cells you want to read. One thing to note here is that you can also insert formulas into Excel. For example, I've added a formula to cell C2. So when I check the cell, you will see that the formula is in there. Next, let's talk about Pandas data frames. Most of the time when I'm working with Excel, I prefer using Pandas data frames instead of list of list. Luckily, xlwings makes it also super easy to work with Pandas data frames. In this example, I've just created a small data frame. Just like before, I specified the top left corner where I want the data to go. For this, I'm using cell A5. Now, reading the data back into a data frame is also pretty easy. First, I will update some numbers in Excel and also comment out the earlier code. And now, to read in the data as a Pandas data frame, we can use xlwings built-in converters. And here's how it works. First, you specify the starting position. For me, that's cell B5 since I'm skipping the index. And then I set the converter to a Pandas data frame. For the range, I could now specify the exact cells like B5 to C8, but it's often better to get the range dynamically. And you can do this with the expand option. Setting it to table automatically selects the entire range, which is just like pressing Ctrl Shift and End in Excel. Additionally, I have set the index to false. And lastly, you need to specify that you want to grab the values. Now when I run this, the data is loaded in the Pandas data frame. And just a quick note here, if I had set index to true, the product column would have been used as the index. Now you might notice that even though I have inserted integers into Excel, the data frame shows float values. This happens because Excel, under the hood, stores all the numbers as floats. So if you only want to get the integers, you could write it like this. Okay, and with that said, let's now save and close the workbook. In the save method, I can specify the file path. And if I just enter a name, it will save in the current directory. So when I run this, the workbook will close and I will see the new spreadsheet in my folder. Alright, and with that we've covered the basic of xlwings. Now before moving forward to a practical example, there's something important I want to point out. In our example, we started by directly opening a new workbook. However, you can actually take it one step further by automating the entire Excel instance. Think of this as opening Excel on your computer without opening any specific workbook. But the key thing here to remember is that you always want to close the Excel instance once you're done with your automation. If you don't and something goes wrong in your code, you might end up with a zombie process. This means Excel will be still running in the background, consuming memory and also system resources. To avoid that, I strongly recommend using the xlwings context manager. Let me show you an example down here. First, we open the app, which represents the Excel instance. Then we use the app object to do all the fun stuff like adding a workbook, working with the sheets, and so on and so forth. Using the app instance also has another advantage. You can set the visibility to false. This means Excel will run in the background without popping up on your screen. So in my example, I'm opening Excel in the background, adding a new workbook, getting the active sheet, which is the first sheet by default, writing some data to a cell, saving the workbook, and then closing it. Since we are using the context manager here, the Excel instance will shut down automatically once everything is done. So when I run this cell, I will see it prints hello xlwings. Also, if I navigate to my folder, I will see the new workbook we just created in the background. So the context manager is especially helpful if you are writing your code in a standard Python file. When I'm working in the Jupyter Notebook, I usually don't use it because I prefer running my code cell by cell. But I wanted to mention it here because it is really useful when you are taking your code to production. Alright, and with that said, let's take a look at a more practical example. In this case, we are going to create a stock report in Excel and save it as a PDF file. So in my stock report folder, I already have an Excel file. The idea here is to update the chart and generate a final PDF report based on the ticker symbol located in the cell B3. Now notice that I have given this cell a name using the Excel's name manager. In my case, I named it ticker symbol. And the charts we will be working with are actually just regular images. For example, if I select one of the charts, you will see the picture options appear in the ribbon. And I've also given these images names. The chart at the top is called snapshot. And if I scroll down, you will see a monthly returns heat map, which is another image named heat map. Now let's see how we can update these charts and also create a PDF out of the report. So back in the Jupyter Notebook, the first thing I will do is to install the quantstats package to fetch stock information. After that, I will import pairflip and also quantstats. By the way, pairflip is a standard Python module for handling file paths, so there is no need to install anything extra here. Next, I will define the path to my stock report, open the workbook, and then select the sheet we will be working with. Alright, now that we have a connection to the sheet, I will define a function. The idea is to first get the ticker symbol from Excel. Now instead of referencing cell B3 directly, I use the named range ticker symbol. This approach is much better because even if I move cells around in Excel, my Python script will still work. So I highly recommend using named ranges whenever you can. Okay, and once you have the ticker symbol, we can do all the Python magic. In this case, I will fetch the daily returns, define the output path to the images we are about to create, and generate both the snapshot report and also the monthly returns heat map. With these two lines of code, I'm saving both images into my stock report folder. Now that the images are saved, the next step is to add them back into Excel. For this, I will use the sheet object and add a picture. And all I need to do here is to specify the path to the image I want to insert. And if there's already an image in the sheet with the name snapshot, and I've set the update parameter to true, the image will be replaced. And if update is set to false, a new image will be inserted. So in my case, I just want to update the existing image, so that's the reason I have set it to true. Alright, and once the images are updated, I will save the workbook as a PDF file. Now when I execute this, nothing will happen because this is just a function. To test it out, I will switch back to Excel. Here, instead of using the alphabet ticker symbol, I will change it to Tesla and save the workbook. And now when I go back to my Jupyter Notebook and execute the cell, the magic happens. So this means if I check my spreadsheet again, we will see that the stock report is now updated for Tesla. The snapshot chart at the top has been updated, as well as the monthly return sheet map at the bottom. And if I look at my folder, I'll also see the 2 new images along with the generated PDF file. Also, when I open the PDF, we can see our stock report. Alright, so this is just of course one example on how you can take values from Excel, process that data in Python, and then return the results back to Excel. However, up until now we've triggered our workflow from a Python file. But in many cases, you might want to trigger your Python code directly from Excel. So let me show you how you can do that. First, let me open my terminal. Here you will type xlwings quick start, followed by the name of your project. In my case, I will simply call it test. After that, you will want to add the argument standalone. I will explain what this argument does in just a moment. For now, let me just execute it. Once it's done, you will see a new folder in your directory. In my case, it's called test. Inside this folder, you will find a Python file and also a workbook. Notice that this workbook has an XLSM extension, which means it's a macro-enabled workbook. I will also show you the macros in just a moment. So let me open the workbook. Next, I will insert a button into the sheet. To do this, navigate to the Developer tab. If the Developer tab isn't visible for you, right-click on the ribbon, select Customize the ribbon, and then check the box next to Developer. Once you've done that, click on OK, and now you should see also the Developer tab. Now go to Insert, select the button element, and draw it onto your sheet. Once you've done that, a new window will pop up asking you to assign a macro to this button. From the workbook selection, choose this workbook and then select the macro called sample call. With that set up, let's go ahead and click on the button. Most likely, if you haven't installed the xlwings add-in, you will get an error message just like I did here. And that's because the sample call macro tries to run the Python file stored in the same directory as the workbook. However, we haven't specified where our Python installation is located. That's why you will see an error saying that the interpreter couldn't be found. To fix this, we will use the settings sheet. So on this sheet, you can insert the path to your Python interpreter. In many cases, if you've already set up the Python path variable in Windows, you can just simply write Python here. The key thing you want to do here is to actually activate the settings sheet by removing the leading underscore from its name. Once I've done that, I will go back and click the button again. Alright, and this time it works. We will see Hello xlwings in cell A1. And if I click the button again, it changes to by xlwings. Now these values are actually coming directly from Python. But before we check the Python code, let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes. When you click the button, a VBA macro is executed. To see this macro, open the Visual Basic Editor. Inside Module 1, you will find the sample call macro that we assigned to the button. The first line here might look a bit complicated, but all it does is to return the current workbook name. It then uses this name to execute the main function from the Python file, which should be located in the same workbook directory. Now, by default, VBA doesn't have a run Python function. That is why we use the standalone argument when creating the Quick Start project. This argument adds another module to the workbook, which you can find here in the VBA editor. This module is quite long, but essentially it defines a run Python function, which we then use in the sample call macro. Alright, and with that in mind, let's take a look at the Python file. This file has the same name as the workbook. And inside you will find the main function which we just executed from Excel. Earlier in the Jupyter Notebook, we had to specify which workbook we wanted to work with. But now, because we are running the run Python function from VBA, the connection is handled automatically, as xlwings is smart enough to detect the calling macro. So with this connection in place, we can now do all the Python magic we have seen before, like reading and writing values. Now, for a more practical example, I've also created another video on my YouTube channel. In that video, we built an Excel data scraper that pulls values from multiple spreadsheets and consolidates them in a new workbook. At the top of the script, I have defined the path where all my spreadsheets are saved. Below that, I created a table specifying which sheets and cells I want to extract the data from. So when I click the button, a new spreadsheet is created and it contains all the consolidated values. And this is just another great example of automating Excel with Python. And if you're interested in that solution, check out the video in the description box below, where I walk you through setting up the automation process step by step. And lastly, I wanted to mention that I'm also planning to create a full Excel automation course. In this video, we've actually just scratched the surface on what's possible. So in the course, I will dive much deeper into automating Excel, helping you save time and effort in your day-to-day task. The course will be around 2 hours long and it will be packed with practical examples based on my experience with real-world Python automation projects. So you will be able to transform yourself into an office superhero in just one day. I will share everything I learned over the years, including all my tips and tricks. Plus, I will cover common issues you might face and also how to handle them. So, if you're interested, you can sign up for the waiting list using the link in the description box below. Just click the link, tick the box for the Excel automation course, and leave your email. And I will let you know as soon as the course is ready. Alright guys, and that's it for this video. As always, thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video.